dignity health, global education. He designs programs with renowned universities across the US to bring high quality experiences to healthcare workers, regardless of their location. He is passionate about advancing the field of online learning through technology, learning science and design, and ridding the world of subpar online experiences. Kurt, I'm going to stop sharing now and turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Appreciate it, Steve. And it's a pleasure to speak with all of you today. You know, when I was thinking about this presentation and how we could create something really meaningful for all of you, I recalled a colleague of mine from a few years back, and she was our digital librarian. And she quickly became my sidekick and navigator to the world of electronic materials, publishers, and everything involved in that. And she was just an absolute invaluable resource to me, saving me time, money, helping with negotiations with vendors, that sort of thing. But overall, she just became a resource. And so, you know, when I thought about this presentation, I thought, gosh, let's approach it from that angle about how, you know, faculty within online education need really valuable resources to navigate the world of ed tech and everything involved in it, and even just the world of best practices for online. That we're going to talk a lot about today. So this presentation is designed with that in mind. It's intended to help you be of support and guidance to faculty teaching online. And my hope is that everybody takes at least one or two strategies away today. I'm linking to a lot of resources as we're going through this, and at the end we'll also have links that we can share with everybody for all the resources that I talk about today. But again, my hope is just that everybody hears at least one or two strategies that you find valuable in helping push your online endeavors at your campuses forward. And so let me share my screen here. I want to start with just how big of an impact this pandemic has had on higher education. You know, so this is a site, Entangled Solutions, that started tracking the impact of the coronavirus on higher education in its earliest days here in the U.S. And, you know, just take a look at that. There's 23 million students being self-reported right now, or just a little over 22 million, sorry, students being self-reported right now as having been impacted by, these school closures and moves to online. Now, I can only imagine that, you know, the vast majority of these 22 million plus students are engaging in some kind of online learning now to stay connected with their institution. So it's absolutely, just unprecedented. I think that's the word I keep hearing used so often when speaking about what's going on here. So I know how, I can imagine how much of an impact this has had on each of you. So my first tip in all of this is to make the case for good online learning. So again, we're going to go through 5 tips, and this is my first one. Make a case for good online learning. You know, if we take a step back and just look at higher education to begin with, we have a problem. You have the highest income quartile in our nation graduating at really, decent rates, in higher education, but our lowest income demographics just graduate at really sobering low levels across all of higher education. So we already have a problem to begin with people actually having real, true, equal access to opportunity through higher education in our nation. But then if we look at online education, study after study is saying that, they find that taking a course online instead of in person reduces student success and progress in college. Grades are low for both the course taken online and in future courses, and students are less likely to remain at the university. This is from 2017. Here's one from 2018 from EduVentures. Based on the available evidence, on average, adults and other non-traditional students enrolled in majority online schools are significantly less than average to complete, or significantly less likely than average to complete at that institution. Whoa, that's scary. We already have a problem in online. Really exaggerates that problem in some cases, but there's hope, right? Because otherwise I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't believe in a better way for online education. And so, in the same report from EduVentures, they find that there's some examples of institutions that report above average scaled online outcomes. So it doesn't have to be bad is the point. But more research is needed to understand the pedagogical and support drivers or other factors that explain that outperformance. So it's a really mixed field, but largely schools who are doing online often see that completion rates in those programs are suffering. So that's why my first tip is to make a case for good online learning and to be incredibly intentional in our approach to online learning. We cannot race into online learning. I know we've had to, but we can't stay that way, and we've got to make a really good, positive online learning experience that the following tips will support here. Now, the first thing in this is just to know your audience and design to them. So ask yourself about your institution. Do you have a large number of first generation, or really any first generation students on your campus? The answer is probably yes. Well, they need a lot more support than the traditional student that has had parents or others complete a college education prior to them. Are they coming from various income levels? Probably. Are you an open enrollment school or a highly selective school? Well, most schools have a pretty open enrollment policy, and very few have the quote-unquote luxury of being highly selective. Well, for those that are not highly selective, we have to be incredibly intentional in our approach so we don't do more harm than good with our online programs. And so it's first knowing the audience and designing to them. And so those are some questions to think about as we go through this. The next thing here, I actually want to offer some resources on how to address this. So we know we need to have a really intentional approach to online learning, but how do we do it? How do we actually meet the needs of the students that might be first gen, that might be coming to us from a lower income family, that might be coming to us without a whole lot of prior college experience or strength there in learning how to navigate what's called the hidden curriculum. All the things that help us succeed academically that we don't even know we know, but we know them because we've been taught them over the years. And so the first thing here, the first tip under this make a case for good online learning is clarity, consistency, and access. And this is the idea that students should be involved in a very clear sequence of learning throughout their program and shouldn't be having to be exposed to an entirely new way to approach their courses from course to course to course. Just because they have a new faculty member doesn't mean they should have a brand new way to actually get the materials that they need to be successful in their program. There should be consistency across courses as much as possible, so students aren't having to relearn how to learn every time they go to class. Imagine if every student's class was, on campus was at some different facility on a different side of town, and every time they had to figure out how to get there. That's not efficient, that's not positive, and that's the same thing that's happening with online is every class ends up looking vastly different than others, and we need to create consistency and clarity across those. And so some great guides for this are organizations like Quality Matters, which I have a link to at the end of this presentation and give you some resources there. And then also this community of inquiry model, which has been widely adopted across higher education as a theoretical construct for how to create really positive educational experiences online. But something that I am always advocating for is the incorporation and the acknowledgement of the power of non-cognitive factors in students' academic performance. And this goes back to that hidden curriculum comment that I made before about all the things that are playing out in our minds that we don't even realize are playing out in our minds that are leading to either our success and failure in academic settings. And one of the best reports that's ever come across my desk in terms of how we address this is this readiness for college and the role of non-cognitive factors in context out of the University of Chicago. It's one of the greatest pieces of work that's contributed to the work that I do to help students succeed at higher rates in online programs or even in higher education in general. It started as a report for adolescents, but was transitioned into a college context with this particular report here. And again, I linked to that so everybody can take a look at that later as well. But just really quickly, this is a really busy screen, so I don't intend for anybody to read through it. I just want to show you that on the left is a Quality Matters rubric. Literally, checklist, item by item, what makes a really sound foundation for an online course. It's a fantastic resource for any faculty member new to online learning. And in fact, they even created a kind of an emergency preparedness checklist now in the wake of COVID-19. On the right is the Venn diagram, is the community of inquiry model that I referenced earlier. And these are the things that play out to create a positive educational experience online. It's been, again, widely adopted across higher education. So two great things to use to have a nice foundation that you can then build upon with a richer experience, which is coming in my next few tips here. the non-cognitive piece, so that report from University of Chicago that I mentioned, the non-cognitive piece, this is the construct that they present in terms of how do non-cognitive factors influence academic performance. So at the bottom of the screen, I won't go through this whole thing because I don't have time. We could spend an hour talking about this, but at the bottom, the academic performance, that's what we want. Grades, quality of work and those kinds of things. That's the ultimate goal is positive academic performance. But all these other factors, which are called non-cognitive factors, are playing into somebody's success in that course and their overall performance. And as an example, if we look at the academic mindset at the top, which spans the whole width of this diagram, it's things like I belong in this academic community. My ability and my competence grow with effort. I can succeed at this, and this work has value for me. If any of those things are lacking in a student's mind when they're approaching their program or their course, they're not going to have strong academic performance. They're not going to have the perseverance to come back to the table and push through that midnight deadline or whatever it may be. So these non-cognitive factors play a crucial role, and not everybody has the luxury of coming to the table with these really well established before the course starts. And so it's our job as educators and as an academic community to understand the roles that these play in a student's performance and find ways to work interventions, I like to call them, into that curriculum pathway to help students succeed to the best of their ability. So again, tip number one, make a case for good online learning. Online learning is incredibly hard to do right. And so let's be really intentional about our approach, and here's some great resources in how to do that. Quality Matters, Community of Inquiry, the non-cognitive model, and then I added an additional one here, which is from Pertz out of Stanford, or all around evidence-based non-cognitive practices that anybody can use in the classroom. You can use these at home with your kids as well. Unbelievable resources here. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, one of my favorites, leverage technology strengths. This is the idea that technology can help us be more effective educators online. So I like to talk about online learning as three big buckets. You've got foundational learning that has to occur. You got to get information into somebody's head. Then people should collaborate. They've got to collaborate with the other, their other peers in the class and the instructor, and then they have to apply what they're doing in ways that demonstrate that they've actually picked up the topics and objectives and the outcomes of that course and can then continue to use that long after that course is over. And so if we dive into each of these, the foundational learning section, this oftentimes what I find is just throwing a book or an ebook at a student and telling them to go read it. And this idea of a student going in and just reading a book or an ebook is lacking any kind of accountability or data on how the student is actually performing in that exercise. And so my recommendation here is to move from a book or an ebook to smart courseware that gives you rich data and insight into the student's performance in that particular course. And an example here is actually from RedShelf. This is the data dashboard that folks have access to, faculty and administrators have access to. It gives you a peek into how students are actually consuming that foundational learning component of your course. And so it's encouraging faculty to utilize smart courseware. There's a lot of them. Every publisher, other people have these smart courseware platforms that are built around their books. So it's encouraging people to use them and incorporate it, and then utilize the data that's coming from those things to give a peek into how well the student is actually engaging with that foundational learning component of the course. So the next area is collaboration. And inside of online programs, we're largely using discussion forums. And oftentimes we're requiring students to just write in the APA format or MLA format in these discussion forums. But when do we talk in conversation in APA or MLA format? Let's make these discussions more modern, more engaging, and let up on some of the really strict time frames that or these really strict guidelines, that we're placing on students for the sake of creating an academic discussion, which is true, we need that. But let's make it a more modern engagement. Let's make it fun and let's make it social, just like we engage everywhere else on the internet. in positive ways. They're not all positive on the internet, but there are many examples of positive social interactions on the internet that we can learn from and bring into the online classroom. There's also tools that really help us do this, that move past the traditional discussion forum. There's tools like YellowDig, which is a modern gamified discussion platform, or VoiceThread, which a lot of schools use. And so, in thinking about the collaboration element, encourage faculty to make it human. Make the collaboration that's happening in their course human, and make it something that they would want to engage in, not just something that's boring and academic, and just having people post a response and respond to two of their peers. The next thing is application. I will never forget the course that I reviewed one time. The course was called Microsoft Excel. It was a college course on Microsoft Office, and this particular unit was on Microsoft Excel. So teaching students how to learn Microsoft Excel. The assignment was to write a paper about the features of Microsoft Excel. And I looked at that and I thought, gosh, this is such a glaring example of what's happening across online education. We've not gotten past this idea that assignments have to be paper, paper, paper. They don't. We can have students do more than just write papers over and over and over again for 4 years. We can make things hands-on. We can mimic the types of activities that they're going to be doing on the job when they graduate so that they can be immediately productive in the workforce. I would argue that the vast majority of folks graduating from colleges aren't in a job that they just write papers all day long. They're in a job that they're doing something with the knowledge, skill, and ability that they gain throughout that program. And so let's bring that into the program. And we can do that now with great tools, with technology that virtualizes software. Microsoft Office 365 gives everybody an online version of Excel to use, so use it. Don't have them write a paper about Excel, have them use Excel. We can virtualize all kinds of software now really easily in online environments, as well as create really rich project-based learning that the LMSs can accept now. They used to not be able to. So again, I encourage everybody to push faculty past that paper mentality and really get to hands-on learning. But one note here is accessibility absolutely matters. And so the first thing I ask any vendor that I work with, any piece of technology, is, are you ADA compatible, and is this accessible to every student? And so keep that in mind, and I link to the accessibility guidelines down at the bottom as well. Tip number 3, and a big one that links to student performance. Encourage student outreach. When we move into a completely online format, the game changes, and we have to use new strategies that we haven't used before. So use the data from these smart courseware systems that we're putting in place, right? I showed you the data that was on the screen, that red shelf dashboard a moment ago. Use the data, login activity, grades, performance data. Every piece of technology, including the LMS, is giving you data and giving the faculty members data that is kind of like looking across a classroom and looking at all the kids or students sitting in front of you. So use the data as that nonverbal feedback that you're getting back about how students are performing in your course, and then act on it. Encourage faculty members, and I said faculty, to text and call and be available to students. A wonderful article just came out in Inside Higher Ed 2 days ago, and it's called Fostering Student Success Outside of Online Classes. And I changed that on this slide because I believe it should be inside online classes. And in that article, which is linked to here, again, you'll get a link to it at the end, it talks about some really great strategies for what student advisors and other ancillary support resources can do to help students succeed in or outside online classes. But every one of those strategies in that article should actually be adopted by faculty. Faculty are the #1 most important resource in student performance. A faculty member will get a student's attention to get them back in class at greater rates than any other person on campus. That faculty member has so much power, and if they're just willing to send a text message or make a phone call, it can make a world of difference to get students to actually completing that course and moving on to graduation, which is what we all want. A former colleague of mine, Eric Evans here, actually just posted on LinkedIn great do's and don'ts for texting students with actual data. in the response rate changes that they've seen as they've tested different types of messages to students to help get them back in class and back on track. They even gave a little video, which is, it's kind of a silly little video, but they gave a great video with some strategies on how to use texting in online courses. So again, I linked to it there, that, and everybody, you know, please take a look at it, and just overall encourage texting and outreach for students. It takes a village to graduate a student, and texting is a great tool in the tool chest to reaching them. So the next thing here, tip number 4, is encourage collaboration over lecture. So I just saw this screenshot here, and I had to use it. So, you know, this is the sign of the times right now. University of Zoomsylvania. It's like, I paid too much for this education. You know, what we're doing right now is passive learning. I'm not asking you questions. Some of you might be taking notes. Others might be multitasking. Who knows? But what we're doing right now is very, very passive, and it's not an active learning environment at all. And so my fear of what's happening right now is everybody's replaced classroom time for Zoom time, and they're not active classrooms. They've just moved lecture from one place to another. And it's incredibly ineffective. I always like to say, think of the last Netflix documentary that you watched. How much do you actually remember a week or two later? Unless you talked about it with somebody else, took notes on it, or actively reviewed it again and over again. Very little will you actually remember. And so the same thing's true here. We're overusing Zoom because that's what we're comfortable with, just delivering lecture. And we've got to change the way we think about it and use collaborative features like Zoom in the right way. So augment lecture with courseware. I'm telling you, my math lab is an amazing math teacher. It really is, or tools like that. And so use these courseware tools to be the lecturer and take the pressure off the faculty member from having to repeat themselves over and over and over again. Pre-record their lecture content, but keep it in small chunks so they're not these hour-and-a-half long recordings that nobody on earth is going to watch. And then use the live time like this, real sparingly, but for important things like active learning. Get people involved in groups and make them work on projects. Make sure everybody is actually engaged in that experience and a good use of their time, instead of it just being a passive learning experience for others. And so I've posted some resources here to help support this section as well. Tips for preparing virtual sections, so you don't just end up lecturing. So faculty members, I should say, don't just end up lecturing for the entire time they're on. And then a link to a wonderful article that just came out yesterday, I think, from Brian Alexander, who's a futurist. If you haven't followed Brian Alexander's work, he's just a lot of fun to follow and see what he has to write about. But he just posted his latest article about, really flipping the higher education new normal, moving from this synchronous, everything's Zoom, and the classroom equivalent is just Zoom, which it shouldn't be, to an asynchronous model that really gets people engaged at every step of the way. And then tip number 5, my last tip for 5 at 5, is I encourage all of you to be a guide through the world of ed tech. EduVentures posted this article in 2018 that at that time $50 billion had been invested in ed tech, and there were over 15,000 ed tech teams from 50 different countries around the world actively working on different things that all come our way. So it's this idea of let 1,000 flowers bloom, right? There's so many thousands of options out there. It's overwhelming. And so we can help be a guide for faculty for curating and connecting them to tools that have been evidenced to work. Enough time has passed in our ed tech world now that we actually are beginning to understand what works and what doesn't work. And the ones that don't work are beginning to die off or have died off. And we're left with tools that are actually showing positive results for students. And so again, folks like RedShelf, who are engaged with so many different publishers across the world, have a good feel for what's working and what isn't working. They're a great resource for you. So you just ask them, hey, I have this subject we're working on with this faculty member. Are there any things that you've seen that are working in this field? Maybe it's math, psychology, whatever it may be. And then ask the publishers. If you have good relationship with publishers, which I suspect many of you do, ask your publisher representatives just to get demos of their latest stuff and ask them questions like, is this accessible? Does it link, single sign-on with our LMS? What does it cost? And what are the outcomes that you're seeing with this tool, in terms of students like mine? And give them a good picture of what your students are like at your school. And then there's other resources out there like Holland IQ, which publishes this global learning landscape. And they give tools like this where you can go to their website, which looks a little crazy at first, but inside of their website they've got this periodic table of ed tech. So I can click on higher education. I don't know, my computer's running a little bit slow here. Just be 1 second. You can click on higher education, and then I'll just go to Ed Resources because that's the one that I wanted to show here. And then when I go to Ed Resources, look, here's a whole bunch of things that have been identified as educational resources. And guess what? Here's our friend's Red Shelf right there on the list. So this is a great way to get to and sort through the 15,000 things that are out there on the market, right? Probably more. So that's a great resource there. And again, I've linked to that at the end. And then EduVentures publishes a technology landscape, an educational technology landscape every year. And I've linked to the 2019 version in here as well. So please, utilize these resources. There's companies that just mine this information and publish it. So that way it makes our jobs easier in finding the tools that are out there and the things that people are working on. Right now, as an example, there's so many folks running in the AI space and seeing how artificial intelligence can help improve learning outcomes. And again, it's like, it's the new, buzzwords. So now there's 1,000 companies out there working on AI. And so, tools like this help us sort through that noise and find really well-established players in this space. So those are my top 5 at 5 and how to, in what I thought would be good suggestions for all of you in moving your online programs at your schools through your faculty from surviving to thriving. So again, make a case for good online learning. Higher education, it's already hard enough on ground. And the shift to online makes it even harder for people to actually graduate and have a return on their educational investment. So be intentional in the approach. Use the resources around non-cognitive skills and quality matters to help make good, solid decisions in the way in which learning is being delivered. Leverage technology strengths, pull technology in and use the data. The beautiful thing about technology is it gives us another view or another lens into the student that we didn't have before. And that lens helps us understand when it's time to reach out to them. When it's time to just, extend a hand and say, hey, I noticed you haven't logged in for 3 days. How can I help you? Or in the last assignment you submitted, I noticed that, you had this misunderstanding of the concept. How can I help you? It's our jobs as educators and as schools to get people through these programs so they can succeed as a result of having been through our educational experiences. And outreach is an incredibly important aspect of that. Again, encourage a collaboration over lecture. So if you're seeing Zoom used all over the place at your campuses or whatever it might be, encourage them to use that time as collaborative time, not lecture time. Nobody wants to sit through an hour-long lecture. Most of you don't even want to sit through 30 minutes of me talking about this. And then the last thing is to, just be a guide through the world of ed tech. So I can't do any presentation without having some kind of a meme. And so this was just really fitting for the times right now. Here's moving classes online quickly. This, guy's all proud, and then wait for it. Poor student outcomes will sneak up. They will sneak up, and we've got to be ahead of that. We cannot let poor student outcomes sneak up on us just because we had to move online quickly in the wake of what we've been facing with COVID-19, which is just incredibly unfortunate. But it's our reality. So let's get ahead of it. Let's be intentional. Let's utilize these tips and these strategies to make really solid online learning experiences, because it doesn't have to be that way. So when I think about the role that all of you could play, I found the only social distancing acceptable sport right now, which apparently is golf for some reason. And so, be that caddy to the golfer. Help point them in the right direction. Help them pick the right club for the right shot. and then help them be a better golfer just by being the guide on the side. And that would be my advice to everybody here today, is just to be that guide on the side. So here's all the resources I went through. I believe Steve is going to share all these out after our time today. I just want to say, thank you for giving me 30 minutes to talk about this. This is a space that I'm really, passionate about moving forward. As Steve mentioned, it's my personal mission to rid the world of subpar online learning experiences. And I believe we can do that one class at a time. So a little bit, if you want to learn more about Dignity Health Global Education, which is the organization that I work for, you can find us at dhge.org. And if you know anybody in the healthcare space that is, well, first off, please thank them for their work right now. It's unbelievably important, and it's unbelievable what these healthcare workers are facing. But if they are looking for any kind of educational support or programs, fully online, and they work in these settings that we're all faced with today, they can find them there on dhge.org. So, thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. That was really fantastic. I will invite anyone now. I know we're a bit over time, so thanks for hanging on with us. Invite anyone to unmute yourself if you'd like and ask any questions of Kurt while we still have a couple. Kurt, are you okay to hang on for a second? Yep. Okay, awesome. Okay. We didn't have any questions come through chat, but Kurt, I'll throw one out there. In your third tip on student outreach, I'm just curious if you have tips for making faculty more open to greater availability, to be or more open to do that outreach and to be more available. What motivates them, and how could you make that happen?
Yeah, I believe every faculty member wants to see their students succeed. I wholeheartedly believe that. They're in that role because they're an educator at the core, and an educator, is after student success. And so, what we've found is that helping them with some really clear strategies, like for example, how to construct a text to a student, or giving them the tool to text, and then having them see the result of that in real time. Having them see a student who who's ghosted them come back because of that outreach, they quickly get on board to say, "Oh, I get it." Just like they do in a classroom when they find a new teaching strategy that they start using while they're lecturing, to keep students' attention and things like that. It's the same thing. They just need to be kind of shown the way, and then they can see the fruits of that labor, and then the rest follows. So I just, that would be my recommendation there.
Great. And then your tip on collaboration versus lecture, and this might be included in one of the resources you provided, and to answer your question, we will provide those in our follow-up communication with the recording to this. But between courseware and recorded content and those special live moments, is there an optimal mix that you've read about of those?
Well, oh, sorry, I'm getting interrupted. Hang on one second. Hang on, buddy, I'm gonna call. Please, you have to go find Mom. Go ahead. I want gumball. It's trying to get me to buy it. Okay, I need you to go out. Go ahead, please. Okay, sorry. That's the world we live in. He wants to go to the beach. I'm kidding. Yep. I really wish there was a beach behind me. So the question was about optimal kind of mix of lecture versus collaboration. So I'm going to be a bit extreme here, but I would say 100% collaboration, 0% lecture. So, I think, and I only say that because I really do just believe that folks tune out pretty quick when they're sitting back passively listening or watching. Especially to the same person that they've watched before. And so I would strongly encourage that, each session is really thoughtfully designed from a collaboration perspective instead of a lecture perspective.
Great. Well, all right. Thank you for the extra time again. It was great seeing you today. I think everybody's going to benefit from this content but also the fantastic resources you put together for us to look at after.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, we had one chat come through here. Yep. So everyone can look for that email in the next day or so. And in the meantime, please go back to about.redshelf.com/connections for the recordings to this session and previous sessions, and also to sign up for the future ones. So thanks again, and
thanks everybody. Everybody stay safe and
Thank you so much.
and healthy.
Yep, you too.